Hey, what's up everybody? Rob Arnold here. Thanks for stopping by. So a long time ago, almost a decade ago, me and my main man, Chimera drummer Andols Herrick, wrote and recorded a full instrumental record. I had just gotten my studio going after leaving Chimera, and one of the first things I wanted to do was have him come in and lay down some tracks for my debut solo album. So I've been sitting on that though ever since. Like I said, we wrote it, recorded it, all Andols parts have been done this whole time, but I've been sitting on it and just kind of finding every excuse in the book not to finish it off. Just been procrastinating for a lot of reasons. Early on, maybe it was an insecurity in my ability to mix the record. I had no doubts I could track it and get everything recorded, but I wanted to learn more before I mixed it and got it out there. And then procrastination set in, other things took priority. Fast forward even years past that, gotten into the YouTube thing, did my elite records, stuff like that, and it's just been on the back burner. I've been talking about it for a long time. A lot of you guys have been asking about it for a long time, but the good news is I finally began work on it here. And so what I thought I'd do is kind of just bring you into a session here of the first song that I've decided to work on to start mixing, and just take you through that. First of all, those that don't know, mixing is just combining all the recorded tracks to make it sound great, like a good song. So a lot of people I've noticed have the misconception that a band just gets together in the room and plays their song and it's all recorded at once. That's how it used to happen a lot way back in the day, but for years and years now, we've been doing what's called multi-tracking, and that's where the drummer records his parts, then the guitar players in whatever order, then the bass player, then the vocals, and it's all mixed together then afterwards. And it looks something like this. Look at all these tracks. These are all drum tracks. These are all bass tracks here. These are guitar tracks. And this is small. There's no vocals in here. The solo tracks aren't in here. There's going to be lots of additional tracks, and it's going to be a fairly large session, but small in comparison to huge movie score sessions and things like that. So you can think of a movie the same way. All the sounds, the music, the sound effects, all that are mixed together. So right now, I'm beginning this mix to put all the tracks together, and I'm actually doing right now what I call the mix prep for it, just kind of preparing everything for the main mix. So before I get into any more of that, wanted to mention that I understand a lot of you have no interest in the mix process or learning some tips and tricks or just seeing how my session workflow goes for something like this. But, give it a try. Not only can you hear some riffs, get a sneak preview of what's to come, but, sometimes it's cool to get a good look under the hood. You got a fast race car, you want to see what's going on underneath there, So I figured for people who aren't interested in the process, we'll hit that, no problem. And even if you're not, give it a try and let's see what happens. So jumping right into it here, this is the session for, I guess, I was calling it RA07. I don't know if it was the 7th song that had written in succession there, but the working title for it is Conniption. I've had that since the beginning. I kind of just used some working titles as we were going through here. Just still in Pro Tools, it's just labeled as RA07 there, but this is going to be Conniption. So whenever this is ready and released, you'll know that this is the one we were working on here. Let's get a little taste of what it sounds like here. Oh, and first of all, this isn't like the first song that I would have wanted people to check out or anything. It's just kind of what I decided to just kind of start working on. I had to start somewhere. Could have started with number 1, but just went with this one. Going to be a big ripping solo part. Haven't brought in the solos yet to the session, and I'll explain why that is in a little bit. But whether you like the sound of what you just heard there for that split second, there's a lot more to come in the song, but every song is different. They're all just a collection of instrumental tracks. The album's about 12 songs, I believe we've got on there, and they're just on the shorter side of things. And I know for a long time, people always wanted to hear more Chimera instrumentals and stuff, but Chimera instrumentals are generally on the longer side. These are just a little bit shorter, wham bam, thank you mammers, but a bunch of them, and they're super cool. There's diversity amongst every single track, just different things going on. And to make Chimera instrumentals took 6 guys, just a lot of brains involved in there. So if you're expecting a bunch of implements of destructions or heart of it alls and stuff like that, it's not going to be quite like that. You know, you'll definitely hear the Chimera vibe. You'll definitely hear the groove from me and Andols and stuff, but it's going to be something different, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. So yeah, lots of cool parts we're going to get into here. So right here, we're looking at the drums there. I went ahead and edited these pretty much right after he had recorded them way back in the day. So all the editing for this track is done. Guitars are recorded, bass is recorded, everything is edited and consolidated. And what I was saying about mix prep is that, so what I've done is I went to the original session that I recorded everything in, and I took all the audio out, and I've started a brand new session here, totally clean. There's not much processing going on at all. I've done a little bit of processing, but I'm getting it in here and just getting my general drum sounds, the sound that I like that I'm gonna then use on every track. So in a sense, this is kind of setting up the template for the mix of all the songs. I just had to choose one to start with. As I mentioned, I decided to start with this one. It felt kind of more open and just roomier for me to make better decisions on what I want the general mix to be. So I get my general drum sound going, certainly no automation, and what automation is automatically having faders move up and down, or volumes or panning, or things in processing like your effects and things like that, that way later in the mix, at least in my workflow, I'll implement those things. A simple example could be he's playing some part and the hi-hat just isn't quite loud enough. Maybe he just wasn't putting as much into the hi-hat, or he's playing a technical double bass part, and so his brain isn't quite as focused on hitting that hi-hat, and it kind of disappears in the mix a little bit. So you can just go to that particular hi-hat section and bring up the volume of that so it's nice and consistent. There are tools that can do that automatically as well. Let's say you want, we're about to drop into a part, dun, 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 boom, dun, 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 dun. Maybe I want the kick drum of that boom, right when it happens, to have more impact, so I can automate the volume of that kick drum up a little bit. Maybe I want a big snare in a part to hit, so I can automate the snare to come up. So anyways, I leave all that for the end. I don't want to do that in any of the work that I'm doing right now, because I want this mix to be able to easily translate over to every song. And then after every song has the same consistent type of rhythm basis, the way the drums sound, the way guitars sound, and the way the bass sounds, I'll then make individual tweaks to every song, in every section, to every note that requires some. And I'll get into more detail about that. So I got my general drum sound going here. Let's see what that sounds like with everything real quick. Hey, just wanted to break away for a sec to remind everyone about my Patreon campaign. It's everyone who's gotten involved with it that allows me to do what I'm doing here, which is hopefully providing content that you find interesting, educational, informative, entertaining, or all of the above. And those who are a part of my Patreon campaign will hear all of these songs first. They'll be along with me throughout the ride every step of the way. Not only will members of certain tiers receive this and all of my albums for free, but your name will be forever associated as an executive producer of my music, which is something that was never possible in the past. So if you have the means and would like to read and learn about the different perks available to you as a member of my Patreon campaign, head to patreon.com/RobArnoldWorld, or simply find the link in the description below. Now, back to the video. So a little more about these drums. There is some sample reinforcement behind the kick and snare, and how we recorded the kick drum is a special technique where he did not actually play to a kick drum head. We put a special mesh head on there that's virtually silent. So when he hits it, it doesn't make any sound, but it still feels like a natural kick drum to him. And then we triggered that sound into his ears so he could still hear every time he'd play a kick. But the other microphones on the cymbals and the toms and the snare and the room mics and everything wouldn't hear his kick drum. He would only hear the sample played back into his ear every time he'd hit. So it'd sound natural to him, but even better than natural because it'd have a trigger sound, which he likes. You know, all drummers want to hear that high trigger sound to be able to, because it's so hard to hear with all the loud acoustic drums going on around them. And the main advantage for when recording a drummer like that is, because no drummer is perfect, and no matter how meticulous they are, sometimes, just as an example, let's say he goes to hit the kick drum and a crash at the same time. That needs to be on together to have the impact you want. You can't have it flammy a little bit like the kick drum hits first. So when you zoom in and you see, I'm looking at, right here, this happens to be, here's a kick, and there's a crash, or here's the room, those are further away, so you see those are further, that's okay. But let's say that crash was late. I could, while editing, move that crash over, move the kick over, or put them however I want them, like this. But the fact is the microphone that was recording that crash cymbal and everything else in the room still will hear that kick was early. Even though we move the kick over into time, or vice versa, it doesn't matter. The microphone heard that kick drum was early, and it's there in the microphone in the recording. So by not having the kicks in the recording, you can easily edit the kicks or edit any part of the drums, and there'll be less of those ghost type of like flams that can show up when the kick drum is really in there and was played poorly or mistakenly or something like that. You need to fix it. Now, you can get away with doing lots of stuff to fix that or whatever, but this is just a trick that makes it way easier. So they sell those mesh heads at Sweetwater and stuff. That's where I got them if you're ever interested in that, but it's a cool technique. There's lots of other ways to do it as well. I've had guys play no kicks before. They just kick on the floor and pretend they're playing, then we fill in the kicks later. Whatever it takes to get the job done. And then there are guys that are just 100%, or, you know, Andols has recorded a million times without that mesh technique, you know, and we just made it work, but came around to it and it was cool. So, and then there's some snare behind there, and I haven't done any automation of the velocities of the snare. So right now they're all the same velocity. So if he does like rolls, they're gonna sound a little machine gunny. And a trick to correct those is to actually look at his snare transients. So here's, let me take the group off here. Here are his snares, okay? Look at this one. This one is louder than this one. These two are louder than this one in the middle. This one is louder than this one. Look at these. This is way louder than this one, than this one. Those together, these two are different. That's a flam there. So that's how a drummer's hands really sound. So the trick may be, if I were to bring back in my MIDI, let's see, I'll move that right underneath it. I'll show the velocity. So right now, all the velocities, these are snare hits here, right here, right here. Let me go to notes so you can see that better. So these are all snares. There's that flam. Okay, so what I would do is, this is a big one. We'll keep that just how it is. This one here, this snare, see, is smaller, but the velocity is way higher. But if we bring that down to kind of match it, it's smaller. This one's even a little bit smaller. That actually might be a little bit too much. But this flam here, the first one is smaller than the second one. Okay, then this guy, he's smaller. This guy is smaller than that guy, so we bring him down. This guy's pretty big still, so that's gonna match the velocity of that a little better. Get rid of this. So that sounds a lot better to me. It's subtle. One thing I want to mention, and I'll mention this again later, is that it's best to be listening to all this stuff on some nice speakers. If you're just listening on a phone or whatever, you're not going to hear a lot of the bass things I'm going to talk about. You may not hear a lot of the little innuendos I talk about. So these snares right here is what we're listening for. They're going to sound a lot more human right now. That's the natural humanness you would play. But if I went back and put all these back, it's going to be subtle, but it's going to sound a little more machine gunny because all these snares are at the exact same velocity rather than having that human element to it. Now, I won't do that until I really get into mixing. So that's getting the sample together, getting my drums the way they want them to sound, the guitars, the bass, everything like that. Then I'll do that to all the songs using these settings. Then I'll go back to this song and start doing the little picky stuff like this, where I'll go through the entire track and I'll automate all the snares so that visually they match the way the actual snare drum track looks, so that those samples are being played at the exact or very similar velocity as his actual snare drum hits, and it should sound real and be transparent, which is the point of it. You don't want samples to stick out like samples. You don't want them to sound fake. But Andols is a fantastic drummer, and his drums are gonna sound badass regardless of what's going on. Let me get rid of these. Now we're good again. So he's just solid. Cool. So, like I said, very minimal processing on these. Basically, I've got a little bit of just some cuts in the overheads there, the left and right crash, and nothing else. You know, these are just some sends to some verbs. I got a little polish that I call it for some high end. I'm using this this DF Excite, which is like a drum forge plugin, I think, and this Kramer guy here, which is just adding a little top end to my drums overall. And that's basically it for that. Let's check out what the bass sounds like. So I was struggling with the bass this at first, but then I'll tell you about this new plugin I just got. Here's what the bass sounds like just on its own with no plugins. This is just the raw DI. All right, so it took me, this is 4 tracks of bass. They're all the same. They're all just doubled, but they're all processed differently. So I got one track that sounds like that. This is what it sounds like after I did some processing to this particular track. That's taken out all the low end from it to create a crossover. Got a little EQ there and some PS1, which is a Sans amp. Then I got another one that sounds like this. Some grind. Again, no low end in this one, because I'm going to let another track do the low end. This is just super low end, no high end in this one. Look at that. I'm scooping off everything above 100 hertz, or cutting off everything. You're not going to be able to hear this if you're just on an iPhone, I bet. But this is going to fill the low end, which I've got ultra compressed there so that it stays consistent. So there's a consistent low end throughout. It's not audible just on its own, but it's going to keep the low end nice and consistent. And then I've got this, I just bought this plugin yesterday, and it was what I was looking for. This is the Tone or Bass Forge JST Hellraiser that gave me the grindy kind of sound I was looking for. Now this, to me, just like this, sounds like it needs more high end, more brightness. But it's the combination of all these that give me the sound that I like. This plugin's cool, check it out. It goes dim when it's not on, and then when it kicks in, it turns on. Watch. Look at that Hellraiser. So anyways, I like that sound. I don't love it, but it sounds good in the mix. So I got it to where I loved it, but then it wasn't working quite well in the mix. So a lot of the times you'll go to work on something in solo mode like these are, and you think it's great, but then it doesn't work in the mix. So I go about 80% of the way I want it soloed, then I continue my tweaking with it in the mix. It sounds like this with everything. Listen to it roar, listen to the clankiness and the groove that the bass has right here, coming up. Couple things. So a lot of this stuff's going to have leads and solos over it, and those solos are already actually done for this tune, but I haven't brought them in yet because, like I said, I wanted to focus on getting all my rhythmic instruments ready to go, and that would include the rhythm guitars in this case. And I feel it's better to build like that than to be overwhelmed with so many sounds to worry about mixing at once. So you get your drums sounding solid, exactly how you think they should, and then start bringing in the bass. And then once the bass is in there, you may realize, oh, I need to tweak the drums a little bit. So go back to what I said before is, you really only get the drums about 80-90% of where I think they should be. Then I bring in the bass, get that about 80-90% of where it should be, and at the same time I'm making tweaks to the drums to get them to work together nicely. Hear how they sound together, just the drums and bass working nice together. In my opinion, pretty good. Anyways, then I'll move on to guitars and do the same thing. And then after I get that good, then I'll bring in the solos. Then I've got a super nice foundation to really treat those solos in there the way I want them to sound. If I were trying to get the solos in there now and get them to sound all sick and solid and stuff like that, I'm still gonna make a ton of adjustments to the other instruments. So everything, you're just fighting yourself in a situation like that. So get your foundation really nice and then bring in solos and vocals and things like that. This stuff's not gonna have any vocals, but I would apply the exact same principles to that. I wouldn't wanna be messing around with my vocals while I'm still trying to build my rhythm mix. Guitars. All I did actually was throw on the exact same STL tone hub that I've been using in a few of my last videos that I've been showing you that just sound great, which is this Mark Lewis preset, which is a 6534, which I'm assuming is like a 6505, through a Mesa cab, mic with the 57. I don't have any overdrives on whatsoever, like I never do here at the house. The amp, I've tweaked this tone here how I like it. I don't remember exactly what I did there. Cabinet, somebody asked me the other day where I put the mic, generally right off the edge of the dust cap there. EQ, I've got some going on here, but I don't remember I did this so long ago. And then no effects going obviously for this, but it's a pretty nice sound. Just scooped out a little bit around the 3.5 range. Listen to the difference here, let's see if you can tell. That's in. Listen to it, bypassed. On, cleaned up. Bypassed, ugh. But you just don't notice that weird noise until you seek it out. So what I did, again, the other day was you go in there and you start with a thin cue, a narrow cue, and you go in here and I search around and find the ugliest sound I can find. Most annoying one. And then I'm simply just gonna pull that down after Pro Tools resumes. So I'm gonna simply pull that out of there. Listen to the difference. Simple as that. So I like this sound of these guitars. Oops. But after I've totally decided on this kind of stuff, I'm going to decide whether I want to tweak this even further, because I'm still building things, or whether I'm going to reamp this through a real cab, and I'll probably do some experiments like that. I'll do some experiments where I mic up 6505 and through probably my Marshall 1960 cab, do the best I can with that. I'll bring them in and then I'll A/B them. I'll compare them. How do those sound compared to the best sound that I can get from this amp sim? And then obviously the one that sounds better and works better in the mix is the one that I'm going to use. So you can see the track was just wide open for solos, a lot of cool rhythm, chords going on in that area. One thing I wanted to point out here, this little section, check this out. A lot of you guys have heard me stress before the importance of working with other musicians. When I first wrote this little section and just had some programmed drums in there or whatever like that, there's no way I had that beat in there. I probably just had like the drummer jamming along with it. Down, pop, boom, 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 ba-da-da-da-da, pop, boom, boom. Whatever, fine, but kind of boring, whatever. Where a real drummer, Andols, comes in and surprises me with this. Something unique and instantly memorable that I never would have thought of. So that's why working with other guys makes a big difference rather than everything coming from one brain. From one brain could be cool, certainly great things can happen and stuff, but bringing in another talented source, you know, and somebody to discuss and talk about things with, you come up with cool ideas that you probably may not have on your own. So there it is, guys. There's that beginning again, so you can remember conniption. Lots of cool stuff across the album. Appreciate everybody who's made it this far and stuck around just to see kind of the little behind the scenes inner workings of what I've got going on right now and how I'm approaching all of these sessions. So I got a little more work to do with this. I'm constantly refining every time that I sit down here in the morning. This is about day 3 of doing this. And this is gonna be the longest one as I'm setting everything up, obviously. But, you know, so I make little refinements as I'm going. I'm laying there at night, you know, I can make that snare sound better if I did this, or perhaps I can get the bass in that at bar 54 that I've been thinking about that slide to really stand in there if I were to separate the guitars and automate this panning. You know, I'm just thinking about this stuff constantly now that this is on the brain. So gonna add in the rest of these solos and just get it as close as I possibly can. So then I'll move over these tracks to a new session, bring in the audio from the next track, and just continue 10, 11, 12 times until all the songs are there, do all my final tweaks, that sort of thing, and then I got to put everything together to release it. Artwork, packaging, setting it up for distribution. So still a lot of work to be done, but The good thing is I've gotten going here, got my new computer, things are running smooth, somewhat smooth, and we're on our way, guys. Appreciate everybody on my Patreon campaign who's been supporting me. That I sold the Patreon thing at the beginning saying that this is what I was gonna be working on, so I am. It's taken me longer than I thought because the YouTube thing's been going well, so trying to balance both things, you know. But the support, the interaction, the comments, the likes, everything that you guys are providing me with, and I hope I'm providing, you know, content that you guys enjoy. It seems like it's, you know, kind of win-win. So really appreciate you guys, every single one of you that are watching and just all that. So cheers, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Thanks so much.